Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cultured Pull List. This week, I'll be talking about DCKO number one, the first issue in the newest big DC crossover crisis type event thing. Yeah, it's pretty wild. So I'll be talking about it and reviewing it and having fun. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Cultured Pull List. Sorry I missed last week. Some life stuff came up, including being kind of sick, so if I sound all stuffed up, that's why. I'm still kind of getting over that. But yeah, this is gonna be a fun episode. DCKO. A lot of you have been following, DC or comics at all recently. You probably have heard about this. Honestly, going into this, I had some different expectations than what you know the book actually ended up being. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. First off, I want to talk about something I completely forgot to talk about last episode when I was talking about the news, the comic news coming out of New York Comic Con. I completely forgot to mention the announcement of an absolute Catwoman mini series that's going to be like 6 issues long, and it's coming out in 2026. No like specific date announced, and it's going to be written by Shea Grayson and Scott Snyder, and Bengal is gonna do the art for that series. But that could be pretty cool after Absolute Catwoman's debut and last issue of Absolute Batman. Could be pretty cool. Seems like she could be a fan favorite going forward, so that'll be fun. Now, one other piece of comic-y news I wanted to cover before diving into DCKO is a new deal with Blumhouse to adapt Something is Killing the Children by James Tynion IV. Now, this is going to be two adaptations made simultaneously. It's going to be a live action movie and a animated series. Then they're both going to be adapted at the same time. I don't think there's any word on whether this is going to be whether the two adaptations are going to be just strict adaptations of the story and just kind of like one's animated, one's live action, and one's longer because it's a TV series or what. I don't really know. We don't really know any of big details yet. Besides, Blumhouse is producing it, and it seems like James Tynion the Fourth is gonna have a big hand in it. Um, Looks like the artist too will have some input as well. Werther Del Adera is going to be an executive producer on the show and the movie, I think, and it seems like James Tynion the Fourth is going to be showrunner for this series, or at least the way the article from the Hollywood Reporter said he was shepherding the series. So whatever that means, but it seems like the writer and the artist are definitely going to have a big input in how these adaptations are made. Now, I've actually never read this series. I've seen it a lot. I've seen it on my local comic shops a lot the last few years. I've always been curious about it, but I've just never like gotten around to reading it. So, yeah, let me know in the comments if this is really a really good series. I've heard good things. I mean, I'm probably gonna read it before the movie slash show comes out, anyway. But yeah, so any fans of Something is Killing the Children, um, hopefully you're excited for this. I mean, I'm interested at the very least, and I'm glad that the actual creators of the comic are so heavily involved in this. Now, Blumhouse themselves are kind of like hit and miss with their movies, so I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully, it's good. Now, let's get into DCKO. I feel like, though, there needs to be some groundwork laid here if you are not really familiar with all the stuff that's been going on with DC All In and really the absolute universe itself. They've been really like closely interconnected, and I'm gonna just do a really quick like Cliff Notes version. But basically, this all started in the All In special that came out in December of last year, and basically Darkseid amassed even he went on this like huge pilgrimage and amassed even more power, and then he confronted the Justice League and seemingly died, but he didn't really. He just kind of seemed to like ascend into like godlike status, and he left this big rift in like space and time basically, and it was, you know, emanating omega particles, and he ended up going to the it's very complicated, but he basically went to the else world, which was basically like multiverse, but the Earth 1 had been cut off from the multiverse during the Absolute Power event. And I'm trying to make this less confusing, but Darkseid basically went to this unformed Elseworld and made the Absolute Universe, and he, you know, he wasn't restricted by time or anything, so he basically just like started it from the beginning of time and shaped it in his own image. So now it's a fully formed absolute universe, but Darkseid's also expanding across time and space and just taking everything over. And this has been seen through a lot of different series, but mainly through the Superman series that's currently going on by Joshua Williamson, and the Justice League Unlimited series that's being written by Mark Waid. And then there was also this special, the Justice League Omega Act, that was just kind of like a prelude tie-in thing. But basically, the Time Trapper, who was an older DC villain, but then revealed in the Superman series to be a future, like evolved version of Darkseid who has time travel powers, he formed the Quantum Quorum, which includes the World Forger and Gorilla Grodd, who was recently tied up in some time travel mischief, and Booster Gold as well, who went through that rift that the Darkseid left in the Justice League Watchtower, but ended up getting sucked into the future of the Absolute Universe, I believe, and then he got irradiated with all these Omega particles. So now he's pretty powerful too, but he was captured for years and tortured by Darkseid's Legion, which is like a twisted, dark-sided up version of the Legion of Superheroes. And yeah, so all that to say, this Quantum Quorum, they are now trying to convince the Justice League to, I don't know, basically prepare to fight Darkseid, doing like whatever they can, because Darkseid is coming for basically the entirety of the multiverse and all of time, the future and the present. He's already like infected the future and everything. So that's pretty much where we are at the beginning of DCKO. It's kind of a lot to know because you kind of basically have had to read all those series I mentioned and the one shots and all that stuff to kind of know where we're at, and it's kind of confusing, but it's also really cool in my opinion. It's definitely like this is definitely like building up to like a crisis event, though it's less multiversal and more of like a time, more like multiple timelines and time travel and stuff than, you know, like a Crisis on Infinite Earths type thing. But yeah, let's get into DCKO, which was written by Scott Snyder with art by Javi Fernandez, inks by Javi Fernandez and Zermanico. Colorist was Alejandro Sanchez, and the letterer was Hassan Asmani Alaho. God, I'm really sure I butchered that. And this was released just this month, October 2025, doing a new book this week. And this is only a first issue, so if y'all are interested, and honestly, if I like it enough, I might just cover the whole like DCKO series once it wraps up in March. But yeah, let's not put the cart in front of the horse here. So there's this whole event, and before I get into the story summary, it's really like being hyped up as this big, you know, event, and this kind of made me think it was different than it was, because they released like this bracket, and they kind of made it seem like it was just gonna be like pitting DC heroes and villains against each other. And I wasn't sure if it was actually gonna like tie into the wider overall stuff they've been doing with Darkseid and the whole like all in initiative, but it really is. And also, if you want to collect these yourself, if you want to collect, you know, DCKO and all the tie-ins, the list for October and November, like all the tie-ins and stuff, is up on the screen now if you're watching on YouTube or on Spotify. But it's basically, you know, DCKO #1 this month, #2 next month, and then there's all these other tie-ins with Titans, Superman, The Flash, Justice League Unlimited. Pretty much all of them have come out already in October, but they're going to be continuing in November, along with Aquaman #11 as well. And there's also DCKO Night Fight #1, which I'm guessing is going to be like a one shot, but that's another tie-in. So yeah, if you want to collect the tie-ins and the main DCKO storyline, here's what we got for October and November. I'm sure they're gonna release more lists for the next months coming up soon. So let's get into the summary for DCKO #1. So, starting out, Clark and Lois invite Bruce and Diana over to play a Wayne Enterprises tabletop game. During the game, though, the sky turns red and Darkseid begins conquering all of reality, now embodying pure godhood and existing across multiple realms and times simultaneously. Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman and the rest of the Earth's heroes try to fight Darkseid, but they're all swiftly defeated. But luckily, this battle is revealed to be a vision shown by the Quantum Quorum. Like I mentioned earlier, a group of cosmic entities, Time Trapper, Alpheus the World Forger, who was actually the older brother of the Monitor and Anti-Monitor, fun fact, and Booster Gold and Gorilla Grodd. They reveal that Darkseid is conquering all time and suggest restarting the timeline to escape him, but the League refused to erase their identities and memories and everything, and they basically don't want to restart the timeline like DC does every like 20 years or so. So to find another solution, the Forger begins explaining the two primal forces in the universe. There's alpha energy, which is the creation in life, and it's centered in Earth. And then there's the omega energy, which represents conquest and destruction, and it's centered in apocalypse. Darkseid claimed the power of the Omega Heart in Apocalypse, and that's how he became as powerful as he was over the years. And powered by Omega, Darkseid seeks to assimilate Earth, the greatest alpha source, turning it into a new apocalypse. Now, the Earth's core now holds an Omega powered heart, so there's a lot of Omega energy now focused on Earth. After World Forger is done explaining everything, Batman theorizes that maybe someone could absorb the power of the Omega powered heart to become King Omega, rivaling Darkseid and becoming the universe's sole celestial entity, able to reshape the universe however they want. However, the Quorum, mainly Time Trapper, warns that only a conqueror, not a hero, can control this Omega power. The heart will attempt to defend itself, and it will create a series of challenges of increasing difficulty to test all those trying to gain its power. Booster, however, insists that the League should compete for the heart in this game, but Superman is hesitant to force his fellow heroes to fight each other, potentially to the death. But Batman and Wonder Woman take Superman aside and convince him to agree to the plan, and he realizes that maybe their only chance to save the universe from Darkseid. So in the next 7 days, the League makes preparations before going after the heart to prepare Earth and may make sure that the villains can't attack the heart and try to gain the power themselves. So, first off, Mr. Terrific imprisons every villain on Earth, including a redeemed Lex Luthor. He uses modified versions of his T-spheres to send all villains on Earth to Phantom Zone. But the Phantom Zone has recently been turned into a place of healing instead of just a prison, so it's not as horrible as, it could be, but it still goes against their consciences to imprison all these people without due process and everything, but desperate times and all that. The second step of the plan, the heroes coordinate a global evacuation effort with world leaders and use tech from the 10 most powerful companies in the world to build giant arcs able to evacuate the entire population of Earth in case things go south or things get worse with Darkseid trying to take everything over. After that, the heroes spend time with their loved ones, and then they prepare for battle, each choosing unique weapons. Like Batman prepares a Justice Buster armor, Wonder Woman prepares her God Killer armor, Cyborg chooses a Father Box upgrade, and Superman uses these brass knuckles that are powered by miniature yellow suns, which are pretty cool. While the heroes are preparing and when they're going to compete in the tournament, the Quantum Quorum is going to use all their powers to slow Darkseid's approach, and they're hoping against hope that it will be enough to stave him off until the tournament ends. So, to start the tournament, the heroes travel to the Skartaris Nexus, which is a gateway to Earth's core. Booster Gold unleashes some of his Omega energy, which helps them get into the Omega core. Once he does this, all the heroes get transported into this vast arena that's guarded by demons. And the demons explained that all the contestants must cross the arena line to qualify for the next round, and if they fail, that means elimination. So all the heroes make a dash for the line, but they're attacked by the giant demons. Billy Batson, Shazam, is killed before he can even transform it into Shazam, or Captain Marvel technically. And Green Arrow, Damage, Adam Strange, and some others are eliminated pretty quickly as well. Jay Garrick accidentally triggers traps that unleash these other monstrous Omega demons. Meanwhile, Superman is focusing unconsciously on helping all his allies instead of advancing himself. The heroes fight valiantly, but at the last second, the imprisoned villains show up. Somehow they've escaped the prison and are trying to make a dash for the Omega Heart themselves. Joker ends up taking Batman by surprise and killing him. And with no time left to mourn or even think about what's happening, Superman rushes to the end of the line and secures his spot in the next round. Now, out of all of the heroes and villains that show up, only about 30 make it to the end. And it's kind of a long list, but the list includes Superman, of course, Joker, Star Sapphire, Jay Garrick, Vixen, Connor Hawk, Etrigan, Cheetah, Hawkman, Lobo, Zatanna, Power Girl, Plastic Man, Batwoman, Starro, Big Barda, Lex Luthor, Harley Quinn, King Shark, Aquaman, Black Lightning, Supergirl, Firestorm, Damian Wayne, Black Canary, Captain Atom, Swamp Thing, Cyborg, Red Hood, Guy Gardner, Metamorpho, and last but not least, Wonder Woman. But that is not the end. In a final twist, it turns out that the Heart of Apocalypse is sentient and is aware of the whole tournament that's going on, and it is revealed that the Heart has actually been the one narrating the book the whole time, and it already knows how the tournament is going to play out and who will fall, who will fail. And it turns out also that Darkseid's champions, his three horsemen, are also going to be involved, and they are teased to be Absolute Batman, Absolute Superman, and Absolute Wonder Woman. And one final twist, it turns out in secret, Darkseid has already possessed the body of Booster Gold, which means that the contest is futile. Darkseid has already won. He already knows what's going on, and he's obviously not gonna let it continue. He has his own plans to win. So that leaves things on a pretty dire note for everybody involved. So yeah, let's talk about the book. And by talk about, I mean I'm gonna talk about it and you're gonna listen. So DCKO, I was not really expecting this. Like I said earlier, I kind of like given like the way DC was promoting this with the bracket and everything, I was kind of thinking this would just kind of be an excuse to like have these one-off fights, kind of like Avengers versus X-Men, which did have a story, but it was also kind of an excuse to have Avengers versus X-Men have these, one-on-one bouts with each other. But this really ties in heavily with everything they've been doing with Darkseid, and really, this is like the big crisis-ish event that they're having, even though they had one like 3 years ago with Final Crisis on it. No, what was it? Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths, right? Yeah, I think so. Dark Crisis. Yeah. There's so many crises. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I thought this was really cool. I mean, obviously the art was great, which is almost in every book in DC nowadays, which is awesome. But I thought the story was really interesting. It was definitely kind of convoluted, the whole thing they're doing. Like, you really have to like research everything that's going on, or else you'll be a little lost, which is a little unfortunate. I wish they had like done a little better job. They have a little like blurb at the beginning, I think. But I wish they'd done a little bit better, like explaining everything, because there's like a lot to know. If you haven't been following all the different DC All In series leading up to this. But I really, I think while the idea of a tournament isn't exactly original and it could be kind of like cheesy or something. I think it kind of works in this, though, like the way they did it, I feel to me works. That, you know, the heart's gonna put them through these crazy challenges to gain its power. I guess going forward, we'll see for sure if, like, you know, they really follow through with it and it really works. But I thought it was pretty cool so far. My one gripe is I kind of wish there was maybe some other heroes on there. Like, I was very surprised with who made it through. I was honest. Well, I mean, I was kind of expecting all of the main Trinity to make it through. So I was honestly, that was pretty good, subverting expectations to have Batman get killed. And that is another thing I liked. They actually like killed characters. They you know, they made it seem like nobody's safe really. Obviously whoever wins and be, you know, they're obviously going to have a big thing where somebody wins and takes over the power of the heart, defeats Darkseid and rewrites everything and, you know, brings everybody back. At least I, you know, that's what I'm assuming. So even though, you know, nobody's probably going to stay dead forever, but it still kind of shows, you know, that like you don't know for sure who's going to win if even Batman gets killed. So I think that was actually a pretty good decision on their part to, you know, have one of the big three get eliminated in the first round. But some of the people that are in, you know, the next round, like I wish, like out of all the out of all the Green Lanterns, like guy's cool and all, but I wish it was like Jon Stewart, you know. And I, you know, I kind of would have preferred Nightwing to Damian, but you know, it's fine. I mean, this is me just kind of being like, I wanted my favorite characters to get in, you know. But you know, still, like I do like that they kind of had a, it's a good mix. It's not like too many obscure characters that nobody cares about, but it's not just the main lineup either. You know, like we don't even have Wally West in here. It's Jay Garrick instead. And we got Big Barda, no Mr. Miracle, you know, just stuff like that. It's kind of hidden like Starro is so random. Also, was not expecting Captain Atom to show up. Haven't really seen him much lately. I guess he's been in the Atom Project series, but other than that, like I haven't seen a whole lot about him. So yeah, that's kind of. Oh, and we got two super people. I wasn't expecting two. I was expecting. I mean, I was pretty certain Superman was gonna make it through, but I wasn't expecting Supergirl to as well. But yeah, overall, pretty cool. I'm really excited to see where this goes. Again, my only gripe, besides, you know, some of the characters, you know, some of my favorites not getting through, I am a little worried this is gonna be like, I mean, this is kind of every crossover though, but I really hope you don't have to read all of the tie-ins to get the main story. Sometimes you kind of have to read the tie-ins to really understand everything. I hope that they make the main DCKO issues digestible for people that don't want to read every single tie-in, because there's already like a ton of tie-ins in this. I feel like with Absolute Power, just reading the main Absolute Power was like you really had to read all the tie-ins to really get the full story and really fully appreciate it. So I kind of hope they don't do that really with this. But and anyway, really cool book. Let me know what you think in the comments about DCKO if you have read it. And I will definitely be continuing reading it. And honestly, I probably will read a lot of these tie ins if I'm being honest. But I don't want to have to read them, you know? But yeah, that's pretty much the episode for this week. A little bit of a shorter one because I'm only covering one issue, but I thought it was kind of important to cover DCKO since it's like one of the biggest things going on with DC right now, besides like the Absolute Universe, which, by the way, I am going to be covering Absolute Batman soon, so stay tuned for that. But to wrap things up, I want to talk about my cultured picks for this week. If you're new to the show and you don't know what that is, it's basically just me spotlighting some other comics I've been reading that aren't related to the current topic of this week's show. So, you know, whether they're really good or really bad or just, you know, worthy of note for some reason. So, this week I want to talk about Absolute Evil, which is another DC, and it's mildly related to this, but it's a one shot for the Absolute Universe. And to be honest, the whole comic is just kind of all of the big bads of the Absolute Universe getting together in a boardroom and talking about, like, what are we going to do about these heroes? But they made it really interesting because it's kind of rich in the lore of the Absolute Universe. And it's kind of cool to see all the Absolute heroes through the eyes of the villains. and seeing the different takes on the villains. Like Ra's al Ghul is like this roided up like Bane looking dude, and it's really interesting because in this universe he's kind of more of a Superman villain because he runs the Lazarus project or whatever it's called that Superman's been fighting, and but he actually works for Absolute Brainiac. So that's all interesting. But basically, there are a couple like cameos in here, like Absolute Green Lantern, Absolute Hawkman are in this. I guess they're not really cameos, but they're we get to see the absolute version of those characters. So that was pretty cool. And there is like another absolute character teased at the end. Um, but basically, this whole story really goes to show like how messed up the absolute universe is, because these people are like the worst of the worst, and they are running the world to the point where they aren't making an injustice gang or a Legion of Doom or whatever. They're making a like they are making a Justice League. They're calling it the Justice League when it's really, you know, a group of the worst villains in the world, but because they run everything, they get to say that the way they want the world to be is justice. So I thought that was pretty cool. Definitely worth reading if you've been reading some of the other Absolute books and want kind of a, I guess, just kind of a lore dump and to get into more of the villains of the Absolute universe. But that is gonna be it for this week, everyone. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. Be sure to like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, and give this show 5 stars on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can scan the QR code on the bottom left on the screen here if you want to check out the Cultured Nerd and the Cultured Pull List on social media. And if you want to support us on Patreon, please do so. We could really use your help. Thank you to all the current Patreon supporters for helping us keep the lights on. But we can always use more support, and we would really appreciate it. So if you want to do that, if you want to help support us, head on over to patreon.com/theculturednerd. And if you want to support the Cultured Pull List specifically, just go ahead and look for our show's tier on that Patreon page there. I have been Mike, your host, and until we meet again, take care of yourselves and read some comic books.